Welcome everyone to our webinar today. My name is Michael Pagel, the Program Manager of Greening Healthcare, and our topic is recommissioning hospital ventilation, heating, and cooling systems, which is going to include types of changes you can start making immediately, how to use energy data and analysis to find areas for improvements, and also hear from a couple of hospitals currently working on their recommissioning projects. Greening Healthcare is a program of the Climate Challenge Network with technical direction from EnerLife and partners with CHES. We are funded in part by the Government of Canada through the Implementation Readiness Fund program. And as always, please ask any questions using the Q&A option. We'll try to address those as they come in. And this presentation and recording of the webinar will be posted to our site, greeninghc.com, usually later this week. And with that, I'll pass it over to the Executive Director, Ian Jarvis.
Thanks, Michael, and good morning, everybody in the West. We got a large contingent from BC, Alberta, and Manitoba on the call today, and good afternoon to everybody else. And let's move to the next slide if we could. First, I want to give a shout out, as always, to our program sponsors whose commitment financially they make possible a lot of the work that we do, but the technical guidance, the advice, the input they provide to this in terms of what's practical, we see industry as critical members of this whole arrangement. They have the resources and the expertise to help everybody get to where they need to go with respect to energy and emissions, and we always greatly appreciate their support in every way it comes. Next slide, please. Like every Climate Challenge Network event, we always begin with a land acknowledgement. Our participants today from coast to coast are in many ancestral and often unceded territories of Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people. We share these lands with them. We're meeting today on a virtual platform, but we're speaking from Toronto, the traditional home of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River, and Toronto and all the land from the islands up to York Region, subject to the treaty with the Mississaugas of the Credit River. And as always, we're going to be talking today a lot about the planet, the environment, and it's always our hope that the work we're doing today and together with everybody on this call contributes in a meaningful way to our responsibility that we share as stewards of the environment. So let's move to the next slide, and I make no apologies. Those of you who are regular participants in Greening Healthcare events have seen this slide before. I didn't see a good reason to change it because it's still very topical in terms of the why. So Amandeep and Giovanni have done a great job today assembling the very latest thinking that we have with the results coming back from dozens of hospitals across Canada and in the United States. What are people doing that's having real results, real impact, saving a lot of money, saving energy, and from our perspective in particular, saving very large sums of greenhouse gas emissions. So we appreciate the work that you're doing, and we learn from it, and we pull it all together into whatever you all tell us is needed, like checklists and case studies and best practices, and these kind of presentations on what are people doing, what's working, how can you do it too. So today you're going to hear the best of the low-cost, so-called low-hanging fruit, things that everybody can do, they can do right now. And that for us is the what. What we're looking for from you is the how. And so Amandeep's going to be touching on where do you find the resources, where do you find the time. We were just chatting with Brent, who will be a panelist later today, about there is so much going on in hospitals, so many challenges, so many demands, such limited resources that we just got to be inventive together. Because on top of this, we're asking, all hospitals everywhere to make a real difference, take the action that they can take to reduce energy, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And this slide again, which you've seen before, climate change is the defining issue of our time. It's not going to go away. All we can do is mitigate it. We can't stop it. As said this before, as terrible as wars are, as terrible as pandemics are, they do eventually come to an end. The climate crisis is not going to come to an end. We can just make it a bit less bad than it would otherwise have been. The healthcare sector is at the forefront of this. At the forefront in two different ways. One is, as you know, healthcare is a major greenhouse gas emitter, and our world is all around energy and emissions due to operations of healthcare facilities. But you're also at the front line of the damage being caused by climate change. The hospitals are the ones who treat the first line responders, the members of the public who get injured by floods and fire. You're seeing the uptick in respiratory diseases, which are the direct result of climate change, of greenhouse gas emissions. We get growing evidence from many of you around mental health issues. People will increasingly find it hard to cope with this, the fact it's not going away. And young people in particular, I have 9 grandchildren, and we have a lot of discussions about where this is going. Many of you will have heard the keynote address at our forum 2 years ago by Dr. Ronald Cohn, who referred to in a very moving way the fact that more than 80% of the illnesses that the Hospital for Sick Children, where he's the CEO, sees are now due to climate change. More than 80% of children's illnesses are due to climate change. It matters. The healthcare sector, the hospital sector is at the forefront. It is the defining issue of our times. Governments around the world have made commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And what we hear all the time is, while they keep upping the ante with respect to how soon we'll get to what reduction in emissions, we're not meeting any of those targets right now. And particularly, we're not meeting them with respect to buildings. And particularly, we're not meeting them with respect to hospitals. The notion of thinking globally, acting locally is critical. So we've got to think of this as a global issue. We're all in this together. There's no one country that's immune from the effects of what's happening right now. But governments can't fix this. We know that governments can set policies. They can use taxes. They can use incentives. They can set standards. They can set codes. But the solution to greenhouse gas emissions is down to every single individual, every single building, and in particular, in this case, every single hospital having its role to play. And Amandeep's going to talk today about every greening healthcare member knows what their target emissions reduction is, just to get good, not by investing huge amounts of money that you don't have, but just by running what we've got more efficiently. And that's what today is all about. It's making the best of what we already have, doing the things that we can do right now that can make a real difference. And together, collectively, we can make a very big difference. So that's what today is all about. Registration as of this morning, there were 126 people representing more than 50 hospitals on this call. Together, you represent tens of millions of dollars a year in utility cost savings, money that the healthcare sector can badly use right now. And again, from our standpoint, tens of thousands of tons of greenhouse gas emissions a year. These are big numbers. So that's the opportunity that we have together. There are 77 industry folk making the time in their day to join us today on this call, representing more than 50 organizations. They're here to share, they're here to learn, and they're here to be part of the solution for you folks. Greening Healthcare is here. Michael, Amandeep, and now Giovanni, who you'll meet, are there to respond to your calls, to help you get over barriers when you get stuck. Together, we can bend the curve, we can build some momentum, we can get the upward spiral. And we really hope today is the day we've done all we can to bring what you can do together we really want to hear from you over the coming weeks, where we'll be calling you as to how we can overcome the challenges and get things done. So thanks for the opportunity to share these thoughts. And Amandeep, take it away. Immediate actions to reduce energy and emissions.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks everyone for joining this afternoon, and good morning to folks in West. So we'll start with a couple of housekeeping things. One of them is you will be shortly seeing some of the polls that we'll be conducting through this webinar. So be ready with that, because we are looking forward to those answers as well. So what can your organization do right away? When we mean right away, is something that you could easily control, something that you could implement with your team that needs less resources, and it could be managed within your current workload. Here are the 7 sort of items that we were able to dissect it through working with 5 current hospitals, which are currently planning to do similar of these 7 items, which are more focused on sort of control, low cost measures. HU scheduling still being one of the top measures out there that currently all hospitals are working towards applying them. Seasonal HVAC operations, which looks at pumping operations, matching those with the seasonal operations. We'll talk about that. Enthalpy wheels, one of the largest energy savers in terms of greenhouse gas emissions when operated correctly, is still has a lot of opportunities that are currently not being sort of operated or optimized in greening healthcare facilities. We'll review outside control as well. That again adds to the amount of outside you bring into the facility, and if it's not optimized, it ends up being a higher heating load on your building. Boiler control optimization, staging of the boilers, and similarly staging of the chillers tied to the building automation system is an easy measure that that should be applied across all the facilities. And then we look at the lighting, what you could do with your existing lighting control systems. Feel free to please jump in with the questions, and we'll tackle them as we go through. This is sort of a previous polls. Michael, do you have the polls? Just want to make sure we kind of
I have them. Are you asking? You want to
yeah, I'm
launch them?
I'm gonna ask you soon. Just want to make sure.
I'm ready.
Yeah, okay. So this is the first poll in series of polls we're going to talk about today, is ventilation scheduling. So if you're in a hospital currently representing on this call, we would expect please hospitals only answer this poll. If you currently have ventilation systems that are scheduled or not scheduled in non-clinical spaces, the next poll will give you an option. And again, it's an approximate number based on your current knowledge. If you can share that information, then what we plan to do is sort of work through that information and come up with a better plans to implement all of these measures across different hospital sectors. So implementing sort of ventilation scheduling always comes up with a lot of questions from the facility teams, and we compiled some of them. And I think you may have a similar ones on your mind as well. Generally, some of these questions that comes in is that the hospital traditionally has been operating 24/7. Do we actually have to schedule them? Does it compromise patient safety and comfort if we schedule these spaces? The answer to that, a short answer to that, is no, because the CSA Z317.2 does allow most of the spaces in a healthcare facility to be scheduled. It does not compromise the patient safety or the comfort, because they reviewed that, and their provided their provisions of the CSA are met. There's no concerns with the patient health and safety. Then there's questions about that usually come in through as our facility is an older facility. We don't have building automation systems to a point that we can schedule VAV boxes, or we currently don't have airflow controls. How can we schedule some of these systems? The answer to that we have, and we'll talk about with the Jared from Medicine Hat today. They have a similar, or they had a similar sort of a situation in their facility where half of the facility was DDC controlled with the VAV boxes, and a CAV boxes in many of the departments, where the other half of that is a traditional constant volume ductwork with a supply and return and no zone level control. But they were able to do the scheduling, and we'll have more of that. So it is practical to do these measures with or without controls. Michael, do you have a hands up?
I have the ventilation scheduling poll. Did you want me to launch that?
Sure. Let me complete this slide and we'll launch after that. Other questions that comes in as, do we have to completely shut down these fans, or shall we schedule them at a reduced speed? How much energy is, what's the difference in energy saving? So typically when you reduce the fan speed by 50%, you're almost reducing the energy consumption by 80%. So it's, again, whoever you work with is going to determine what your sort of lowest point of fan operations is that. So it could be done either way. You could reduce the speed, or you could completely shut down the system depending upon the type of the space, but it is doable. And the safest thing in most of the cases is just to start with reducing the speed before you shut down the complete systems, because it still give you the opportunity to have pressurization concerns mitigated by doing that, but you already achieved 80% of the fan power and most of the thermal savings as well by doing that. I touched on that. How does that pressurization and infection control protocols impact scheduling? If it's done correctly, none of these will impact. In fact, it will make it better, because when you invest in scheduling, you're investing in ventilation system, which will help you to make sure that these systems are calibrated, these systems are code compliance, these systems are they're taken into account the infection and the controls protocol, because you're going to be doing pre and post testing when these schedules are being completed. Other questions that we do get, or we got through these conversations with the hospitals, is around steam coil freezing. Some of your systems have steam coils that if they're shut down at nighttime during the cold day, a startup will cause the freeze stat to trip, and sometimes it may cause the steam coils to freeze. So can you do that in colder weather for your systems? There are provisions in your control sequence of operations that you can make it happen. You don't have to go aggressive in certain cases where the infrastructure is old. You can actually schedule your systems for a certain period of time when the outside air weather conditions are there, so that supports the non-freezing of the coil. But in other cases, you can actually, and for the rest of the weather conditions, you can let the system run. But it's a case-by-case basis, and there's not sort of a complete either or in this case. It's a approach that you would take, which takes into account the provisions for making sure that the system is safe to operate and hours that is safe to operate. Sometimes it's better to get half the savings if we can't get the full, rather than not applying anything to it. We touched on the freeze stat trips. Again, there are mitigations in ensuring that the freeze stat doesn't trip during the startups. And with the controls, it's practical to do all of these while you currently apply this with the scheduling. So the reason why we brought these questions back to you is that these are some of the questions you're going to hear from your teams when you start to engage in scheduling those systems. So they have been addressed in the past where the hospitals have been applying these or scheduling these principles. We'll hear from 2 hospitals how they want to plan and tackle these. There's nothing to afraid about this, because there's solution that exists that will help you enable more and more of these schedulings in these hospitals. Another one that generally is an important one is a communication with the staff. Like, what will be an IPAC approval on HVAC scheduling? Would they be considered? Would they be concerned? And how do you convey to an hospital staff who thought about HVAC or thought about the hospital to be 24/7 operations, and when you try to communicate with them that no, these departments are not occupied 24/7, you can schedule them. What does that conversation look like? So generally from our experience is that IPAC, in most of the cases, yes, they have a legitimate concerns, but once you provide them with the data, once you provide them with the information, we haven't seen any pushback from them around scheduling. And if you do see within your hospital that there is a concern, we're happy to connect you with other hospitals which are currently doing this, and their IPAC teams have been working in past to share data among themselves. So that helps you mitigate. You don't have to take on some of these battles because there's already protocols set up that would help you move to the next stage of scheduling with your clinical teams. And similarly with the hospitals teams, if there are concerns with the scheduling, there's been a lot of clinical side initiative in hospitals that the two clinical teams can connect together and confirm or sort of resolve their doubts about the scheduling of these systems. So it always helps when we have clinical folks talking to clinical firms and backing each other on these implementations. All right, Michael, do you want to put this poll? Sorry, a bit of a delay on the poll. So the poll is basically asking about how many of your systems are currently scheduled. So if hospitals on the line could answer these questions, we would really appreciate your feedback, and that feedback is going to go in further implementing the scheduling in these facilities. The second area of where there could be immediate improvements is around seasonal HVAC operations. So one of the key information coming back some of these facilities around perimeter heating, for example, in summer operations is being on. There's no, we looked at a lot of these facilities, there's no good reason for the perimeter heating system to be on in the summertime. And whenever it's on, along with the preheat heating coil being active, we notice that generally that load ends up in a chiller plant. And we'll show you an example of that. Is the chiller energy tends to be higher on those hospital sites where the perimeter heating is on, especially, and also the preheat and heating steam coils are on or active in the summertime, because a lot of the times there's passing valves on these coils, which end up resulting in heat being picked up by the chilled water and eventually goes back to the chiller plant. So that sometimes, if you noticed, in some of these facilities, they have tapped out on the chillers because a lot of that chiller energy is actually going into cooling up that extra heat that's been added by these systems. So again, something that you can assign it to your staff to go around, look at if the perimeter pumps are on in the summer. In some cases, it's as easy as turning those pumps off. In other cases, there are loops that are tied to your main hot water loop. So in those cases, you would have to put in isolation valves to isolate the perimeter heating from the main loops. Similarly, in winter operations, if you have a chiller on with no 24/7 load connected to it, there should be a question back to your team. Why is that happening, and what is the need for the chiller to be on? Because we notice in some facilities that chillers being turned on just provide the cooling to the cooling coil, which then eventually or you overheat the air, and then the chilled water coils pick up the heat in the wintertime, but none of the 24/11 load is connected to that loop, and chiller is running just to offset that loop. Similarly, winterizing the cooling tower, if the chiller is offline, do you actually need it? Because in most cases you don't. And the glycol pumps running in milder weather, because they should be programmed to run when there's a call for heating. Micah, you can close you already closed the poll. So I'm not sure if you see the results, but you will be able to see once we post a slide. But generally, we have a mix of response on the HVAC scheduling, which kind of varies from everybody responding, and thanks for the responses first. There's still a lot of scheduling needs to happen, as we see from the responses. Ian, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I'm indeed the 52% of the hospitals on this call. Again, thanks for taking part and thanks for your candor. Are scheduling less than 50% of non-clinical spaces. A future webinar this year will come back to clinical spaces, which can also be scheduled. ORs and laboratories and other areas, we'll come back to that. But the non-clinical spaces, this is the low-hanging fruit. It's not easy getting buy-in from everybody. But this is the biggest single part of the savings. Every year we present awards to the hospitals making the biggest savings. This area is the biggest single change that they've made over the prior year to achieve those savings. So if we all just commit to getting more of the non-clinical spaces scheduled over the next coming weeks and months, and once again, there's a lot of people here to support and help to make that happen, but these are very interesting and very important results. It's kind of like election night, watching those numbers come in, my favorite part of the whole thing. But this is step one. This is job one. Let's have everybody committing to do more on this front. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Let's do the second poll, Michael, for the perimeter pumps. Again, we want to kind of document some of this information and then provide solutions to these teams based on the feedback we got in today's poll. So the two polls are on perimeter pumps. Are they currently on in summer? And then the second question is, are your steam lines and heating coils are live in summer? And we'll share the results shortly. Let me move on to thermal wheels. We just a heads up, we'll be talking more in detail about thermal wheels control optimization in an upcoming webinar, which we'll get into details about what are some of the issues that we're documenting with thermal wheels operations. But the biggest one that we're currently seeing is a preheat set point too high. So in your facility, if you have a thermal wheel, I would recommend go talk to your operations team and look at these perimeter preheat set points. And if they're not, and generally most of the cases, if these are enthalpy wheels, they should be sized and selected for around -15 to -16 degrees C incoming air temperatures. And if they are set up, if their set point on the preheat is higher in 0, 5, 10 degrees C's, then there's an opportunity for to optimize these wheels. And that is as simple as updating the control sequence to change that set point to a higher or lower set point. While Michael sent you share the third poll about the thermal wheels, I can share the results in the second poll. There are around 26% of the hospital that still have perimeter systems on in summer. That would be a good measure for them to review that with their team. Michael, you can put on the poll for his thermal wheels. Sorry. And there's 21% of them that currently working through knowing their answers, and then 12% have some perimeter heating systems open. So that measure on its own is a very simple to turn on those perimeter pumps in these facilities, so you could save on not only on the heating but also on the chilled water as well. In lieu of the time, I'm going to continue with the measure description. So outdoor air control, this is, again, we looked at many facilities around how much outside air each facility is bringing into during when the heating is on. The graph that you see on the right hand side, the green trend is your outside air percentage, and the blue and the red trends on the bottom graph is your heating and the preheat valve. You can see that the valves, both the preheat and the heating valves are on. The outside air, when it's supposed to be around 33% as per the CSA, is they're bringing in 80%. So that, and similarly trends were for other systems as well. And this was just determined using, initially not through air testing, but just using the trends and the data from your building automation systems. You can actually ask your building operations teams or controls contractor to set up this point on your graphics, so your operations team could actually see this outside air percentage, and they could then determine the next step, which generally is air testing, to ensure that you get the right amount of air outside air into there. But it gives you a point where your operators are engaged on a daily basis looking at this outside air percentage, and then ensuring that you're bringing in the right amount of outside air into the facility, or you're not over ventilating your facility. The boiler plant optimization, there's a whole checklist. If you're a Greening Healthcare member and you haven't used this a checklist, so I would highly recommend you to request that from Michael if you haven't seen it. But today we're just going to focus on, we're going to have a separate webinar on going more details on these individual measures. But today we're just going to focus on the two easy ones that you can actually work out with your team and ask that question about if you have a steam plant that's currently running at 110, 120, 100 psi. You may ask your team what's the reason behind it, because sterilization generally needs around 65 dynamic steam pressure. So there might be an opportunity to reduce that overall steam pressure by test and trial, and you will see what the results looks like. But there's an opportunity to work with your team to optimize just by changing these set points. Then another thing we notice with the heating plant, sometimes they are only connected to the BAS just for a few functionalities, but it always is a good idea to go and check with the controls contractor whether your boilers are fully connected and automated, that the staging is done correctly. Like if the staging is not done correctly, what we're seeing is that the 2 boilers or 3 boilers comes in at the same time when there's load is not there, and which creates a cycle, a purge cycle, and unnecessary waste of energy for turning these boilers on and off when the load is not there. So again, automating this through your building automation system, ensuring that you got the right scheduling, right loading of these boilers based on the outside air conditions. Similarly, the chilled water plant, again, you will find there's a guide that Greening Healthcare issued. You can request that from Michael. It's also, I think, is available through Greening Healthcare website that lists all of these considerations for retrofit and operations. But the easy things to do is look at, again, similarly to the boilers, look at your chiller sequencing. Are they loading correctly? Are you having to run only one chiller based on the outside conditions, or both of the chillers coming on and wasting energy? Is your supply water temperature too low? Because that impacts your chiller efficiency as well. Similarly, the condenser water temperature is set too high. Those are minor modifications you can make in your controls, working with your controls teams to improve the chiller optimization. Similarly, cooling tower controls are your all cooling tower cells are coming in at the same time. They're ramping up same up and down, or they individually coming. What is the best strategy to implement those? Again, ASHRAE has some recommendations. You can, if you're a Greening Healthcare member, you have a technical support available to you to have those conversations with us, and we'll help you find the right solution for each of these. Last one, and then I'll come back to Michael if there's any questions that we need to address. Again, lighting is kind of a two-piece where you're looking at a lighting from upgrading the lighting to an LED controls, whereas in other cases you do have an existing lighting control systems, and the poll is up there if you want to answer those questions. Do you have a lighting control systems? And you can actually start scheduling your system through lighting control systems. And sometimes we find that lighting control systems are there, but they're not fully used because during the transition from redevelopment to facilities, that you would find that simple things like login credentials were not shared. So the facility team doesn't have those information, and they're not able to fully utilize those. So we would recommend you to work with your redevelopment teams and make sure the lighting controls were being put in. You can use them to schedule the spaces, even dim the spaces as well. And we did a study with the hospitals to look at what is the best process and what's the best steps to do an LED retrofit. If you're planning to do an LED retrofit in your facility, we would highly recommend you to look at this guide and then reference it from the perspective of implementing the LED lighting solutions in your building. Michael, do you have any questions?
Yes.
There's another lighting poll, right? Can you turn that on as well? Oh, it's already there. Never mind.
So one question was, what's the ideal outside air percentage for energy savings?
Thanks. So your outside air percentage is determined by the system type. In most cases, it's around 33%. But in other cases, it could be higher depending upon the CSA requirements. but you can reference that back to the CSA table, which will tell you a particular AHU systems feeding those departments, and then what is the outside rate percentage based on that.
And then another quick one from the same person, if you have it, which ASHRAE guidelines can people follow for these controls optimization? Is it number 36?
So 36 is designed around the variable volume boxes, and there's some good sequences in there as well. But most of the control optimization in a healthcare facility is running the equipment efficiently as you could, and it relies, because the HVAC systems in most cases are kind of driven by the air change rates required to be met. So they're generally constant airflows during the day, but you can actually schedule them at unoccupied periods. So there is some combination of references from ASHRAE you can use, but majority of the optimization what we're looking at is pretty sort of a simple in terms of controls of this equipment. Is turning things off when they're not needed is a strategy. I think it's an obvious one that may not be mentioned, but it is something that we need to start doing with the scheduling as well. Michael, anything else?
That's it for now.
Okay. And thanks again for answering the poll. So this kind of those are some of the high level measures. I'm pretty sure there are more that you will uncover when you work with your facility, but then it goes back to how could you identify these measures? What are some of the resources available to you and your team when you start to look at these measures and what you could do? We're going to share 4 of these today, and we'll heavily rely on these especially for Greening Healthcare members, to kind of use these to start working out within your facilities and implementing these. So it is the Greening Healthcare data analytics. I'll show you that an example of that. Technical support, which we're wrapping up this year, and you would have it available to your team all the time, and the internal teams and skilled workforce. And third-party support through current ISO and bridge programs. I'm pretty sure there's folks in BC and Manitoba have similar programs as well that will support you to bring the external engineering services into your team. So if you're a Greening Healthcare member, you will have seen this kind of data analytics from Michael in annual report. So this is your starting point of understanding where the opportunities are and how to define those measures. So in this example, you see the electrical cooling component of 5.2, and also the base thermal of 42.1. Whenever we see this, generally this tends to point out that there's simultaneous heating and cooling going on in a facility, and which is kind of goes back to there's a perimeter pumps probably on in the summertime, there's active steam coils on, and active heating coils on in the summer, which all of them adds to that extra chiller load and eventually increases both the base and the chiller load. So these metrics or this sort of component analysis is your starting point to understand which are some of the measures that applies to your facility. And the Greening Healthcare technical support, and myself and Giovanni, is available to Greening Healthcare members. And these are some of the ones that are sort of the technical support listed here. But this year we'll be coming back to all of the Greening Healthcare members and setting a one-on-one meetings with them, helping them expedite the implementation of these low-cost measures so we can start to see improvements in our healthcare facilities. How do you bring some of the external resources? There are programs currently available in Ontario and other jurisdictions as well. So starting with existing building commissioning program that you can leverage, bring in external consultants if you need more support. There's also support available from Enbridge on energy audits that you can help to bring in external third-party folks to help you support this implementation of these measures. What's next? I know we talked about some of these measures. We talked about the resources. So what would we recommend is that eventually this is going to be something that you want to bring it back to your team. So if you assemble your team, set the goals and assign responsibility, decide your top recommissioning measures which you want to implement in the next 6 months to 1 year, and then document the gaps that you have, whether that's a technical knowledge that, for example, you want to implement a scheduling, but you don't know what are systems to implement, or you don't know, you shortlisted the systems, but you don't know if you're doing it, if it's meeting the pressurization or if it's meeting the code requirements. Document those gaps, documents the gaps around funding, if you need additional funding to implement that. Then what's we're gonna do is Greening Healthcare technical team is actually gonna set up a call with your hospital, and we'll review those gaps with you. We'll provide directions on those gaps and help you and support your team in implementing those measures on a one-by-one basis. So that's something is available to you through Greening Healthcare membership, and that is something we're gonna utilize this year to move the agenda forward and making sure those gaps are addressed and you're well prepared to implement these measures in your facilities. So that brings us to the technical panel discussion. I have Brent and Jared from Medicine Hat join me today. Let me start with you, Jared. You've been part of the Greening Healthcare discussion in the past as well. Let me start with you in terms of your facility. So you at Medicine Hat, maybe can you describe just a very high level the facility and the work that you guys did over the past 2 years in terms of scheduling?
Yeah, so we Medicine Hat here, we've got I think it's roughly 80,000 square meter building total, and then it's kind of sectioned into 3 sections. We have an older wing that's from 1955, and then in 1985 they added on again, and then in 2018 we added on again. So that 2018 build has got digital controls. The 1985 still pneumatic, and the 1955 is kind of retrofitted pneumatic, but still some just like wild situations, wild radiant panels and things like that. So yeah, just a whole mixed bag of, I guess, design. So.
And thanks, Brent, and thanks, Jared. Like, let me show the results, and then I have follow-up questions on that. So, for folks on the line, this is what Jared and his team did. They started implementing these HVAC measures, the recommissioning measures, including scheduling. The blue dots is the actual utility consumption, and red dot is a normalized baseline. And as you could see, the electricity savings starts to appear back in 2021, and they've been continued savings since, or all the way up to December of 2024. And similar results have been there for the gas as well. So Brent, maybe if you can, Jared, maybe if you can describe your process of implementing these measures and your conversations you had with the clinical teams, because it's been now almost 2 years since these measures have been implemented. What sort of feedback you got from them, and have you had any pushbacks from those teams when you implemented, or even after during this whole period?
Yeah, we don't really hear from them now, so no complaints, I guess, these days. But yeah, initially it was mostly just having the conversations with each department manager, sort of thing. Initially, like you had the drawings of the HVAC systems up, we pretty much came up with a plan of, seeing how your HVAC systems overlap certain departments and where that kind of lines up. And then once we knew which HVAC system we were going to try to, we'll say, schedule, we'd kind of have a conversation with the department manager, making sure that just the times that the department's open and stuff like that actually lines up. And then some of it, when you get into the office building kind of area where you've got different people on different schedules, we kind of picked the max. So the 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then we had some people in at 7 until 3, and so we just ended up going from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. as the occupied period, and added like a 30-minute buffer. Usually is kind of how we programmed it, and then trial and kind of implementation, and the department's kind of checking back in with them, making sure that things were all right. We did find in some of the really older areas of the building with the passing radiant valves and things like that, that just extreme outdoor air conditions too, minus 40 outside and plus 40 sort of thing. We also disabled those schedules just during those kind of extreme cold periods. So just little tweaks that you kind of learn as the trying to make some changes in your building. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good caution as well, is that there's always going to be challenges in some regards, and then you just sort of adjust those conditions and make changes accordingly to those conditions. So you don't have to completely sort of disabandon that that measure, but you sort of work around and find a better solution so you can actually maximize it to a point. Do you remember any conversations initially when you introduced that idea? We're going to be scheduling the HVAC systems, and they probably haven't sort of, or for them, there was probably a new thing for the clinical folks, right? Like you had any initial pushback and they were easily sorted out through conversations?
Yeah, exactly. It's the initial panic phase sort of thing. And oh my God, you can't do that. It's hospital. Whether it's with IPNC folks or just even certain department managers and things like that. But at the end of the day, if it's truly unoccupied, then it probably can be scheduled. If it's like an acute care ward that somebody's in every single night 24/7, then it's obviously we didn't schedule those areas and seemed to work out fairly well. The best way to have it is the digital controls sort of thing, and scheduling. We schedule it right down to each individual room. So then, if they change their hours, they could kind of let us know. And there's some fancier controls technology now that you can have occupancy sensors, or if you adjust the dial, it kicks the occupancy in. There's a bunch of different ways to do that, but so those are kind of easy. The challenges usually lie with the older areas of the building and scheduling at the air handler level and things like that. So,
awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, most of the conversations were good with the clinical folks, but it's just coming up with a plan and making sure they're involved rather than just turning their air off one day. But
let me come back to you on that, Brent. You guys started with working on optimization of boiler plant, and then you're now looking at taking on this recommissioning of the HVAC systems. How's your experience so far in terms of introducing this idea to your facility folks and introducing this idea to your management and the clinical teams that this is what is needed? Like, how are you accomplishing that in your facility?
Yeah, we're really looking to get full engagement across the board. So depending on the areas that we're going to try to pinpoint for more optimization than others, we're trying to get some membership for some of the director group, as well as some of the even physician engagement where required, and additionally some executive sponsorship if needed as well, just to help endorse this. Obviously, with every healthcare is to a degree financially constrained, so there's financial aspects that we like to promote, as well as the sustainability piece as well, and making sure that energy is taken seriously along the way. So. And
one of the challenge, Brent, is, and you probably are in the similar board with other organizations, is that a lot of the facility folks and the teams don't have time because they're already busy with the other work. How do you create that sort of leadership within your organization that creates this opportunity as something that people start to feel good about it and start to sort of take this as another sort of a item that they could help them to reduce energy and emissions? Like, how do you manage that piece where everybody's working full time on other tasks and you want to introduce one more to their plate?
Yeah, it's challenging. I'm sure everyone experiences the same type of challenges in a busy environment. But the one thing that I've found effective is we actually have a project manager now who's dedicated to the facilities team that's going to be helping with this initiative. And as part that obviously helps a lot with a lot of the scheduling and reporting back and showing promoting some of the work we're doing as well. Additionally, kind of feeding some of that back to the facilities team to see that some of this work that we're pulling them into is actually making a difference. And obviously with, you know, an initiative like recommissioning, it's low cost with hopefully some substantial return. So it's something that we can promote, and then you get it's somewhat attractive to get some future interest for some larger endeavors in the future as well. So.
Thanks. Let me go back to Jared. Jared, you have this implemented for now 2 years, and the savings sometimes it's hard to sustain because there's been changes that usually get back. How did you guys manage that process so that you can sustain those savings? Like in your case, you had a team that you were managing. They might have got complaints, but it seems like they didn't sort of shut down these schedules. They actually looked at that deeper and then probably resolve those issues through a different lens and continue to achieve their savings. But maybe if you can turn some light on what was your success to sustaining these savings over the years?
I think that's exactly it. It's just having a bit of a plan for when the complaints do come in. The first reaction is always just to disable the entire schedule sort of thing. But like I said, if you're at the room level kind of scheduling, it's, you know, worst case, just disabling one room won't impact everything. But, you know, so if you can just adjust that time per room and meet everybody's needs, then that's the easiest way to do it. But now if the schedule's on the entire wing or floor and just one person wants to come in and at a different time, I know we've kind of accommodated that a little bit, you know, instead of having it just completely disable or not, then we'd have, you know, it'd start up at a little bit on Saturday morning sort of thing. But yeah, I think that's it. Just kind of having a game plan and just not letting, you know, one person dictate, you know, thousands of dollars of energy use, I guess, just because they want to come in and check their emails on the weekend or something. So there's
and you're
having a plan in place, and you know, you got to accommodate everybody, but you also have to kind of sometimes it was explaining to them, you know, the actual cost of doing this, and then they were like, okay, you know.
And how did this boost the confidence in your team, Jared? Like when they see these sort of results from the actions that they did, I'm pretty sure there's some level of accomplishment within your team that suggests that we did something good, and then we'll continue to find. Probably they're bringing more opportunities to you now since they see the success in your facility.
Yeah, for sure. That's part of it too. Is just, you know, when you do actually start seeing those big numbers attributed to just something, you know, really it's simple at the end of the day. It's just turning something on and off on an automated schedule versus leaving it run. So you start actually seeing the numbers that you can produce. It yeah, kind of starts triggering other conversations too. So
Awesome. And going back to Brent, I know this work you mentioned you have a project manager that's going to help you with that. You're looking at sort of expanding that, and I think in our previous discussion you mentioned about how one of your wing, which is a cancer center, maybe you want to touch on that, is that is becoming a priority because I'll leave it to you explain, like, how did you guys come to that sort of conclusion and starting on that?
Yeah, we're looking for the low-hanging fruit, if you will. Obviously, our building consists of basically 4 different vintages. We have our cancer building, which is one of our newer areas, and then we have also our west wing, a central wing, and an east wing. So that's consisted of pneumatic controls and multiple other obviously vintages of controls through building automation systems. So, you know, the cancer building is one of the areas where we have a lot more up-to-date equipment, if you will. So one that we know we can monopolize on that optimization piece with the existing VFDs and infrastructure that's there. So for really a low cost, make some fine tuning and really kind of make this our initial showpiece to see what we can do with this recommissioning. We also have some other areas of the building that we're really looking to optimize on as well, which will follow suit. But then hopefully this will gain the interest and really be a report that we can show what we can do when we put focus on energy and sustainability in specific areas, and hopefully will result then in some additional interest in some more costly endeavors, but ones that will really ultimately result in some significant cost savings and obviously greenhouse gas reductions as well.
Thank you, Brent and Jared. This is really helpful for your participation today in answering those questions and addressing some of the success stories. And Brent, we're hoping to see a case study towards the end of this year with this implementation and share all of your lessons learned and opportunities to that. So just want to reiterate the fact that for the Greening Healthcare members on the line, the technical support this year is going to be available to you to start implementing these measures. Please feel free to maximize the use of that. Myself, Michael, Giovanni is going to be available at your disposals to discuss these plans and start to help you implementing those. I'm going to pass on down this to Michael.
So this is the list of events for 2025 that we have planned. It's available on our site. We keep these fairly up to date if the dates change, or if there's any new information on an event that gets posted immediately. And then as well, any recordings or presentations from our events are posted to these same pages afterwards, and you can go back and check out ones from previous years. So please check this from time to time and make sure all our events are still on schedule and you're signing up for the ones you're interested in. And I think there's one more slide on the membership, because Greening Healthcare program is a membership-based program. And so members of Greening Healthcare will receive strategies to save energy and reduce utility costs. You generally form a network to work together on systematic issues and opportunities, establish any energy use targets and savings potential for every member, and network at forums, workshops, and webinars, as well as recognition through our awards that are handed out each year. And again, check out our website, greeninghc.com, to learn more about this. If you want to reach out to any of us, here's our contact information. Ian Jarvis, the Executive Director. Heather Bell is the Director of Program Partnership Development. Myself, Michael Pagel, Program Manager, and Amdeep Dial, Technical Director. And that's it. Thanks for joining us today. Take care, everyone.